Wendy and welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a collage style painting. This is coffee. I'm going to be dipping some pages to age them, and before anybody chastises me about tearing pages out of a perfectly good book, this is my book. I wrote it. It's a first edition. I had some extra copies around. The second edition is out. I won't destroy any of those, but I did have a few copies of these, and I do use them for my other artwork. I have a fascination with the written word, obviously, or I wouldn't write books, but I also like them in art, and I like stencils that have a text on it or a script on it. Even though you can't read them, that's what I really like. So today we're going to use a little bit of both, the actual written word and a stenciled written word. I'm just going to hang them on this little clippy thing here to dry while we work on our base coat. And the colors I'm going for here are sort of old photograph sepia, creams, those types of colors. This is a bit of a metallic that came from a mixture of some other colors I had. And this is a gray from runoff paint, a little bit of cream, and that's it. And then a little later on I will use some burnt umber just to get a darker tone in here. And yes, I will be using my favorite blending technique for this as well. I'll leave a card in the top corner for you to view my original plastic wrap blending video. And I did end up with quite a bit of paint on here, which normally I wouldn't, but these paints were, again, pre-mixed, so they do have water, Floetrol, that type of thing in them, so it's a bit sloppier, shall we say. I probably should have patted it off with a bit of paper towel first, but I'm going to get there with the plastic wrap. I just may have to do it a little bit more. Now it's starting to get interesting, you can see, and that's what I'm going for: cracks and creases and really old type of decrepit looking type of a background. And here I thought it was looking a bit pale, a little too creamy, so I wanted to add a little more of that cinnamon color in and just make it a little spottier with some darker tones. This is looking really good. I've got lots of that gray background, that first color that was painted on the board before I started, and that's what I want, is a lot of variation. And our pages are all nice and dry now, but we're not going to put them on in a rectangle form. That would not look aesthetically pleasing, so we're going to tear them in interesting shapes. And apply it to just sort of 1/3 of the board-ish over on the right-hand side. And this is just Elmer's glue all with a little bit of water in that I use for a lot of different things. And we're just going to smooth it out as best we can. I want it to start flush over on that right-hand side. And then we're going to encroach into the painting a little bit, but we're not going to cover all of it. Obviously, we want that nice background still to show. So we're just going to do some irregular pieces and try to make a pleasing composition. and the little finishing touch with my name on it. And I did feel that the coffee wasn't strong enough, so I made a sepia type color here, and I really watered it down so it can just soak into the pages. And I'm just going to highlight them all over, I think, mostly, and then we'll go in with a darker color and we'll do our edges more intense, and some of those places where the little pieces overlap, we're going to intensify them a bit too. Now this is looking really good. I like this depth of color, and doing the edges with an even darker shade is working really well around the edges. Time to break out the polyfilla here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my color directly into it. So I'm going to add some black, and I think I put in a drop of cinnamon here as well too, and we're just going to mix it through rather than going back in and trying to paint it all later. Okay, stencil time. This is the only stencil I have with a script on it, so it's what I'm using today. I'm always in the lookout for a better version with a little bit larger. This is the largest one I have, but I'm just going to ignore that symbol that's on the left hand side and just take some of the script and use that. And this is the polyfilla that I mixed the color into. And I do not want this to be even. I want it to be very irregular. I don't want it to look like a squared off text. So we're just doing this very randomly to make sure that all of our edges are just sort of random and irregular. And it's looking pretty good. So now I want to take it and I want to add some of that text over top of the written text. And here I felt I was still missing something. So this is just the straight polyfilla, and I'm going to go and put it randomly and just try to build it up a bit and make it quite textural. And we're just going to come up with a pleasing composition for this, just so it looks like an old wall that's been deteriorated. And as you can see, I suddenly have another patch over there on the left that I didn't have before. I looked at it again after I'd already shut the camera off, and I realized, yeah, for balance sake, it needed one more patch of that polyfilla over there. Now this is the warm gray that I have in the background, and I'm just going to get the polyfilla all covered with that, just so it's sealed with the paint everywhere, and then we'll come in with some other colors for highlights. And now we're coming in with a bit of that watery cinnamon color just as a highlight. And I have to laugh because I just noticed I'm wearing my good sweater, and by good I mean not covered in paint. I have literally ruined 3 sweaters by painting in them when I shouldn't have painted in them, and it's just lucky that I didn't ruin this one. Because then I would have no sweaters left. So yes, having paint clothes is always a good idea, but remembering to put them on is, paramount. And you might be noticing that you can see some of the white around the edges of the polyfilla showing, but that's okay because that's just another element. It just adds to the ancient, old, decrepit texture. And don't be afraid, because there's really no right or wrong when it comes to adding how much color do I put on, how many different shades do I put on. It's really just about what makes you happy, and I'm just trying to go for a different depths of color. I want to see some of the gray, I want to see some of the cinnamon, I want the dark browny black that I'm using, the burnt umber. I just want to, get as much variation on there as possible, because that's what's going to make it interesting. And because I ended up making that plaster part quite dark, I felt that I had lost some of my edges on the actual text there, on the papers. So I am going back in and just highlighting the edges again, getting a little bit deeper, and that's okay. It's a back and forth. It's always a back and forth when it comes to this type of art. And don't be afraid to go back in and highlight something, re-highlight something, change it up to blend in with the rest of what you're doing. And just as a final touch, I decided to take some of that mixed polyfilla and just hit the tops of the bumps of the plaster just to darken them up just a little bit. And here I'm just masking off the area where I don't want the paint to hit, and I'm just going to put in some black spatters over top of the page text. And for a little bonus here, I'm going to show you how I hang these canvas boards. As you can see, it's a bit tippy. They tend to warp a bit depending on how expensive they are and what they're made of. Even though I didn't do this one terribly wet like a pour, it still is a little bit warped. And I do this quite a bit for these canvas panels when you don't want to frame them, especially if they're not very large paintings, and putting them in a frame would cut off too much of what you've got going on the edges. I like to buy unfinished, probably pine little picture frames that are completely smooth and flat on the front and the back so that you can glue them on. So what I do is I take out the backing and the glass or the plexiglass, whatever comes with it, and I keep that little board part there with the hanger to use later. And take out this plexi and the paper garbage and get rid of that. And then it's going to make a great hanging surface. If this hadn't come with its own little hanger, you could, because this is wood, you could take one of those little sawtooth hangers, which I like a lot, and actually screw them into that frame. So what I'm doing is I'm putting it backwards. I'm putting the little hanger thing, I'm not going to bother to tear it off. I'm just going to put it where you're never going to see it. It's going to be on the part on the side that I'm gluing down onto the canvas panel. So just get out your ruler and measure the distance and try to get it as centered as you can. And normally I like to use wood glue for this, but I was all out, so I'm using Fusion. I don't like using it too often because it is a little more, I don't like to use the word toxic, but why not? It has a strong smell, so I use it sparingly, and I usually like to use it outdoors for when I'm doing glass and metal and that type of thing. But I didn't have anything strong enough, so I'm using it today for this demonstration. And I just noticed that I do have that hanger hanging in the wrong place because I need the painting to go the other direction, but that's okay. You just lift the tabs. Take out the back and swing that little hanger around to the other side where you want it. And now all that's left to do is put something heavy on it and then forget about it for 24 hours. And here it is dry, and it did flatten out really nicely after I glued that little frame onto the back, so I'm really happy with it. It looks really good. So thanks for watching, and I hope you try an abstract collage soon.